Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamun Niravanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So, Deutsch oder Englisch? Aha. Soll ich auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch sprechen? you understand better English oder Deutsch? Besser Englisch. So I'll do English. You're already ready. Du bist schon bereit zum Übersetzen, oder? Can you give it to him? So, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, the status quo, with the original Sanskrit, Roman transliteration, synonyms, translation, and elaborate purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we're reading from the third canto, chapter 28, named Kapila's Instructions on Devotional Service, text 11 or 10? 10. Please repeat. Mano achirat syat virajam jitam shvasasya yoginaha vayu agnibhyam yata loham. Ganz kurz. Ich weiß nicht, ob das ein Druckfehler ist. Nee. Matam dvajati vai malam manochiratyat virajam jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham matam tvajati vaimalam manochiratyat virajam jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham matam tvajati vaimalam manochiratyat virajam jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham matam tvajati vaimalam. Das erste Wort von der letzten Zeile ist echt schwer, weil eigentlich ist es ein starkes D. Matam, matam, matam. Irgendwie so. Wer will probieren? Manochiratsya dvirajam jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham vaimalam manochiratsya dvirajam jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham matam tvajati vaimalam. Ladies. Jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham matam tvajati vaimalam manochiratyat virajam jita shvasasya yoginaha vayu-agni-vyam yata loham matam tvajati vaimalam. word by word. Manaha, the mind. Achirat, soon. Syat, can be. Virajam, free from disturbances. Jita Shvasasya, whose breathing is controlled. Yoginaha, of the yogi. Vayu Agnibhyam, by air and fire. Yata, just as. Loham, gold. Matam, fanned. Tvajati, becomes freed from. Vai, certainly. Malam, impurity. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The yogis who practice such breathing exercises are very soon freed from all mental disturbances, just as gold, when put in fire and fanned with air, becomes free from all impurities. Again, the yogis who practice such breathing exercises are very soon freed from all mental disturbances, just as gold, when put into fire and fanned with air, becomes free from all impurities. Purport. This process of purifying the mind is also recommended by Lord Chaitanya. He says that one should chant Hare Krishna. He says further, Param Vijayate, all glories to Sri Krishna Sankirtana, all glories are given to the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, because as soon as one begins this process of chanting, the mind becomes purified. Chetadarpanamarjanam, by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one is cleansed of the dirt that accumulates in the mind. One can purify the mind either by breathing processes or by the chanting process, just as one can purify gold by putting it in a fire and fanning it with a bellows. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyanangyana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Prabhupada Priyadasaya Jagannatha Yatrananda Murtaye Bhakta Sukaya Krishnot Kirtanena Nirsinghe Narakshataye Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashchatyade Shatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nochmal der Vers, again the verse. Mano chiratsya virajang jita shvasyasya yoginaha vayu agnibhyam yata loham admatam tvajati vaimalam. The yogis who practice such breathing exercises are very soon freed from all mental disturbances, just as gold, when put into fire and fanned with air, becomes freed from all impurities. So this is a really nice analogy that just as basically the process of purifying gold by a goldsmith is equated with the technique of pranayama. So when we practice breathing exercises, pranayama, the word yama means discipline. It also means death, but it also means discipline. So discipline means that you follow a certain, routine, something you do regularly, something you do concentrated, also something that you do by counting. So when you perform pranayama, you're always counting how many times you are breathing out, how many times you're breathing in, for how many seconds you're holding your breath. So the process of pranayama is quite variegated actually. There's quite a few different pranayama techniques. There's Kapalabhati and Bastrika pranayama, Nadi Shodhana pranayama. So Nadi Shodhana is more or less considered to be, you could say, the most classic and also the most, in this context, it means exactly what is being explained here. Nadi Shodhana, the word Shodhana means cleaning. Shodhana, Shuddham, something that is clean, pure. Shodhana, to clean, to cleanse. And Nadis, somebody knows what a Nadi is? Nadi? No? Nadis? The Nadis are the energy channels that we have in the body. So in many ways you could say the Nadis correspond to the nerves. Not exactly, but very similar. So Nadis, it says in the Vedic text, it says that there are 72,000 Nadis in the body. Means energy channels in the body. And among those channels, the most common or the most famous is the Sushumna Nadi. So Sushumna Nadi is the Nadi, the energy channel running from the base of the spine all the way up to the head and then to the forehead. So this is the Sushumna Nadi. So you could say the Sushumna Nadi basically corresponds to the central nervous system. So the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. The spinal cord runs within the spine. And of course within the spinal cord and the brain, the main, you could say, activity and connection to the body is taking place. Anything that we experience is anything that we experience, that we do, that we feel, is controlled directly or indirectly by the neurons in the spine and spinal cord. So, the brain and the spinal cord. And from the brain and from the spinal cord, we have visceral nerves, nerves that are coming and are going to the very tip, of each finger to all the different parts of the body. Generally, you could say that from the brain, the nerves that arise from the brain, they mainly control the face and the facial expressions and also the sensory organs in the face. And then the nerves that arise from the spine, they control, the arms, the belly, and also the legs. And some of the nerves that arise from the spine, they also go within the body and control sections of the body which we usually don't have direct control of. They belong to the automatic nervous system. So this is the nervous system that controls sections of the body where we don't have a direct control unless we breathe. So, for example, breathing, we have the diaphragma. The diaphragma separates the upper section of the torso from the lower section of the torso. So this is the thoracic cavity where we have the lungs, and the abdominal cavity where we have this, the belly, the stomach, the intestines. And in between those two cavities we have the diaphragma. In German it's called Zwerchfell. And so this muscle, if you don't think about it, then it's just moving naturally, So when you inhale, it goes like this, and when you exhale, it goes like this. So it's kind of like a dome or like a parachute, So when you inhale, so it pushes the abdominal content, downwards. That's why the stomach, blows out. So actually when you inhale, no air is going into the stomach. The air is only going into the lungs, and the lung area is expanding, and that is pushing the abdominal content outwards. So this is considered to be the most simple, you could say, technique or exercise in pranayama to consciously control the diaphragma. Instead of just breathing like, Because sometimes people, when they hear you have to learn to breathe, you're like, what do you mean? I've been breathing my whole life. I don't need to learn to breathe. But actually, we need to learn to breathe. Because very often we are not breathing properly. In the yoga technique, it's the breathing is divided into 3 main sections. Breathing very deeply, so deeply that the stomach is bulging out. You can breathe more in the thoracic area, means more in just in the chest. Which is much shorter, or even really short is when you just activate the neck muscles and you pull the chest upwards. Especially when you run. If you run really fast, then you will be breathing like this, So these are the 3 main sections of breathing, and ideally you use all 3 of them. So most people, because they're stressed, because they're distracted, because they're not not focused, not in sattva guna also, the breathing becomes more shallow. It means it's not very deep. The deeper you breathe, the more calm you actually are. And we know that, when somebody is, I don't know, like an accident or a shock, then you sit them down, sit down, take a deep breath, So we know that actually. And in pranayama, of course, this is elaborated, very, very, to a great extent, how just controlling the breathing, we are able to actually have a direct effect on our state of being. So I was talking about nadi shodhana. So nadi means the energy channels in the body, and shodhana means to cleanse. So the 2 main channels are the 3 main channels actually. Shushumna nadi is the main channel, and then we have Ida and Pingala. These are the 3 main energy channels that we have in the body. And the Shushumna nadi runs, like I said, from the bottom of the spine, along the back, all the way to the Agya chakra, or the 3rd eye, the inner eye, behind the forehead, or the sometimes also called the pineal gland, somewhere here. But the point is that when you practice pranayama properly, you visualize how the air is flowing in the body. So this is the very simple technique. You inhale, and you visualize how air is flowing upwards through the Shushumna nadi, all the way to the forehead, and then on the exhalation, the prana, the apana is flowing backwards. So it's prana on the inhalation and apana on the exhalation. And Krishna also talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita. Prana and apana, and the goal is ultimately that prana and apana merge into each other, and there's no distinction anymore between inhalation and exhalation. So the idea is that the inhalation and exhalation extend, become so controlled and extensive that they become equal in length and sound to each other. So inhalation and exhalation become equal in length and sound, and then it becomes so subtle that the apana and the prana merge. So then that's theoretically possible. I haven't done it. But what you can practice is to at least, try to inhale as deeply as possible. So ujjayi breathing, as opposed to normal breathing. Normal breathing would be, so usually the inhalation is relatively long, and then exhalation is just, very fast. So ujjayi breathing in pranayama, you make them equal in length and duration. You control them. So it's like, and it's supposed to sound almost like asthma, or like a flame, it says, or like when you hear into a shell, like the ocean, something like that it would sound. And if you do that, naturally, like it says here in this verse, the yogis practices breathing exercises, and very soon they're freed from mental disturbances. So it certainly works. So nadi shodhana then it's, when you do alternate nose breathing. So Nadi Shodhana means you close one side, inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 4, inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 4, like that, Nadi Shodhana. So this is the most classic form of, breathing, and it's supposed to clean the nadis, So the nadis means all the energy channels, all the nerves in the body, but specifically the central nervous system, So if you clean, what's happening in the brain and the spinal cord, means your entire body will relax, focus, all your sensory activities also will become very alert, very clear. And this certainly works. I've tried it a few times. Like for example, if the first time you give a lecture maybe, or the first time you're supposed to give a big presentation in front of many people, or also the first time you go on the altar, you might be very excited, So you do Nadi Shodhana and you can pacify yourself. So this Nadi Shodhana is also recommended actually traditionally to be performed before doing puja and before studying Bhagavatam. So if you do Nadi Shodhana, you calm down, you focus. It's very, very powerful. It's so powerful that Srila Prabhupada is saying in the last line of the purport, one can purify the mind either by the breathing process or by chanting process, just as one can purify gold by putting it in fire and fanning it with bellows. So, of course, we know that the chanting of Hare Krishna mantra is much more, sublime and powerful. But in this sentence, Srila Prabhupada is putting it on the same level. You can either use pranayama or you can use chanting process to purify the mind. So that's very interesting. It's certainly a bona fide process to purify and to cleanse the mind. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, also says that the chanting of Hare Krishna is also pranayama. If you chant very focused, then your breathing will naturally become very steady and very rhythmic. So the chanting itself is also pranayama. So if you do properly chanting, you're also doing pranayama. But of course, Srila Prabhupada is focusing here now on the first verse of the Shikshastakam, mainly in the purport. So the Shikshastakam, the very first verse of Shikshastakam, actually is, you could say, when you have the Yoga Sutras, so many different sutras explaining all the different aspects of, of chitta, consciousness, and how consciousness can be purified by different processes, and how you, develop discipline and attain samadhi, and then different types of, yoga, Ashtanga yoga or Kriya yoga. But all of this is summarized in the first verse of the Shikshastakam, and even more. So the first verse of Shikshastakam is talking exactly about the same things that you will hear in the Yoga Sutras, and Srila Prabhupada is citing also this line: Cheta Darpana Marjanam. So Cheta Darpana Marjanam. Cheta means chitta, the consciousness, which is the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. This is Cheta. And then Darpana is the mirror, and Marjanam means to cleanse. So we are supposed to clean the mirror of consciousness. So this is, in the Yoga Sutras, it is explained in great detail, how exactly Chitta is contaminated. And there's different analogies that are used. But this analogy is very good because in the Yoga Sutras, there's all kind of different explanations how, when you have attained a level of, mind control and your mind has been purified, then you can see finally with pure senses the self. But if you make the analogy of the consciousness to be a mirror, then that's naturally implied. So what happens if you clean the mirror? Then you can see yourself. So that's very, very, very interesting, actually. So that means that in the mirror of the mind, there is this layers of dust that have accumulated. If a mirror has not been cleansed for a long time, then many layers of dust have accumulated, and you cannot see yourself anymore. You're standing in front of the mirror, and all you see is this blurry, image. So that is exactly what is happening. We are, our senses are so contaminated, and our mind has been so, overburdened with so many different material impressions, desires, and attachments, that we don't really see who we really are. We don't know. We cannot perceive it. We don't understand it. So, Chetana Darpana Marjanam. We can clean this mirror of the mind by the process of Krishna Sankirtan. Chetana Darpana Marjanam. How does it continue? Nava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. Devagni Rapanam Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Smaranam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So, we have to cleanse this mirror of the mind, because we are otherwise, trapped in a forest fire of suffering. And this chanting of the holy name is like a benediction moon, and the Chandrika is the moon, and the moon can have two effects. That it says that there are some lotuses that bloom in moonlight only. So, and also the moonlight is cooling, has a cooling effect. And also the moonlight, so three effects actually, and the moonlight also causes the ocean tides to go up and down. So this benediction moon of the holy name can cool down the fire of material existence. Because this dust on the mirror is not just some dust, it's very painful. Because of this dust, we experience all kinds of suffering. So first of all, there's avidya. We have no idea what's going on. We are confused. But then there's also raga, dvesha. There's attachment. There's rejection. So it's quite painful actually. It's a very painful situation. It's like a forest fire that is burning. We sing it also every morning with the Guru Vastakam, Samsara Nala Lila Loka, Tranaya Karunya Ganaganatvam. So there's a forest fire. The forest fire of material existence is burning very strongly, and it can be cooled down by this benediction moon. And this benediction moon cools down, takes away this burning sensation of material existence, but it also opens up the heart. The heart is opened up. You can, you could say, bloom. Your spiritual identity becomes manifested and purified, and then ecstasy abounds. Anandam Buddhivardhanam. So Anandam Buddhivardhanam is very, very, very important and interesting, because it means that within the spiritual reality, bliss does not reach a moment of saturation. So within the material world, we have the experience that any sensation that you have will reach the moment of saturation. So there's your favorite song, and you hear it, and you hear it, and you hear it, and then after 1 year, then you don't want to hear it ever again. Or many things go much faster. Chocolates. You eat a lot of chocolates. And then after 2 kilos, then you're done. And then you hate it. So the more you get it, you become used to it, and it's not anymore exciting at all. So the first bite, it's so amazing. But if you keep doing it, it becomes worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's the nature. You could also say the test. If it's material or spiritual. So if you have a spiritual consciousness and you have a spiritual object, then the connection between your spiritual senses and that object will have an ever-increasing source of bliss. So that's also explained in the relationship between Radha and Krishna in the Nectar of Devotion, that Krishna sees Radharani and he becomes so happy because she's so beautiful and because he loves Radharani. And then Radharani sees how Krishna is becoming happy, and he's becoming more beautiful actually because he's happy. I don't know if you have noticed this, but actually you become more beautiful when you're happy. When you're happy, you become more beautiful, you become more attractive, if you're happy. So Radharani is observing Krishna's beauty and becoming more happy and becoming more beautiful, and then it continues forever. So Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. In the spiritual realm, actually bliss is ever increasing. And even the apparent suffering, of separation, actually is increasing the bliss. Srila Prabhupada even says that the bliss of separation, the pain you feel in the spiritual world or in spiritual relationships, when you feel the pain of separation of a pure devotee or Krishna himself, this pain of separation actually is sweeter than the connection with Krishna. So, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. In the spiritual world, it's the spiritual reality, Ananda Maya, the ultimate reality, is that there is a realm where, you could also say the capacity of the soul, the nature of the soul is to experience ever increasing bliss. It is not the nature of the soul to have to depend on suffering to again have bliss. Because that's this is a material understanding. The material understanding is, if you're always happy, how will you appreciate it? You might have heard this argument before. It's very common in the material world. If you discuss with people, if everything is always good, it's not natural. You have to suffer, and then you can appreciate it. So it's dependent on that. In the spiritual world, is the way around. Even the suffering is even better than the bliss. So this is the spiritual reality. And yes, so this verse, the first verse of the Shikshastakam, is explaining the entire process, of how we are conditioned in this world, how our consciousness is covered by material impressions, how it can be cleansed, what the blessing is, in this case, Krishna himself, his holy name, and how this creates, a purification process. It vanishes and decreases all the sufferings that we have, and can settle you in a position where you're increasing. The analogy that is given there is like the ocean. It's like an ever-swelling ocean of bliss. So because of this powerful moon of Krishna, one of the names of Krishna is also Vrindavan Chandra. So Vrindavan Chandra, he's the moon of Vrindavan. So if the moon of Vrindavan comes into your life, then the ocean of bliss, becomes very agitated. Like there's this very famous warning. I think Rupa Goswami gives this warning, and he says, if you're still attached to the material, objects of sense enjoyment, if you still want to maintain your material life, then don't go in a full moon night to the Keshigat, to the Vamsivat, because you will find Krishna, And once you see Krishna, in the Vamsivat, playing flute in the moonlit night, you will not be able to enjoy material things anymore. So, because Krishna is also known as Hari, and Hari means he takes away your material possessions. And that's why in India, Hari means to steal. So in India, people are aware of this. So Hari, you have to be careful. You want to worship Hari? You're sure you want to worship Hari? He might take everything away from you. All your material, possessions, and you will be only focused on Krishna. But of course, it doesn't have to be only like that. That only in poverty or in material destitution you can worship Krishna. There's many examples that Krishna has devotees who are very wealthy, and very successful within this material world, and still have, a complete attraction and focus to the spiritual reality. So this is what, for some people, it might be necessary. If somebody is very attached to material things, Krishna might take it away. And even Srila Prabhupada said it. Quite a few times he said, Krishna took everything away from me. I tried so many different endeavors, to become financially successful, but he took it all away from me. And Prabhupada took it as a special mercy. And also in the Bhagavatam it says that, Krishna says that I give to those who are specially qualified special mercy by putting them to special trouble and taking away all their material possessions. So it is a blessing, ultimately. But when I was a brahmachari, I had this very strong, you could say, in one sense, maybe one-sided perception that if you want to be spiritually successful, you have to be materially uninvolved. As soon as you become materially involved somehow, if it's money or a relationship or anything material, then you won't be able to be spiritual. So that's more or less the idea of a brahmachari. You try to be, your life content is only spiritual. There should be no material distraction whatsoever. And then I had one senior devotee, Prahlad Singha Prabhu. He made a horoscope of mine, and he told me, "You have to marry." And I didn't like it, but he told me, "No, it's good for you." And he started explaining to me in very great detail, and it was really like a new, you could say, perception of reality. He said, "No, you don't have to be poor. You don't have to live simple. You can be very wealthy. You can have any abundance that you want. You can still be a devotee." And he started giving me different examples of different devotees. Pundarika Vidyanidhi zum Beispiel, for example. He was living, in great wealth and opulence. And was a pure devotee. Or Ambarish Maharaj. Many examples. He started giving me so many examples. And telling me how spiritual life is not dependent on that. Ultimately. It might be helpful to, be detached, to practice tapasya, to live very simply. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in one sentence said, "Na pai beada, na kai beada." You should eat very simple, and you should dress very simple. So that's the brahmachari idea. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport explains then that he says, brahmachari should, or devotee ultimately, he also says, we should eat very simple, very simple, as simple as possible, and also dress ourselves as simple as possible. So that's the Goswamis of Vrindavan. They used to do madhukari, whatever they would get, a few chapatis, braja roti with gur, maybe some buttermilk, and they would sleep under a tree. They would make no arrangements for a house, or a bed. They just sleep under a tree, use the arm as a pillow. So this is one side for sure, which is it's good to be experienced by everyone when you are in the brahmachari ashram. Brahmachari ashram should be that is the time when you can practice this ideal as simple as possible. In Kali Yuga brahmachari might be a little bit different than the Vedic brahmachari. The Vedic brahmachari has dreadlocks, and he's not even using dhoti. He's using just tree bark. You go to the next birke, Birkenrinde, and then you just put it around your waist, with some lianen. So this is brahmachari, and also he doesn't take a shower. He lives very simple. So the brahmachari that we practice is not like that, like described in the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam. The brahmachari might even have a cell phone, but if he can be without a cell phone, probably better. As simple as possible as a brahmachari is certainly good. And then at one point, you might be much more involved with yukta vairagya. That you have to learn how you can engage all different things that are available in Krishna service, including money, family, possession, success, whatever you might have. If you use it in the service of Krishna, then it becomes purified and spiritualized. Okay, I think I'll stop here. Maybe there are some questions or additions, comments, corrections, anything. Okay, Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.